welcome to the first in my new series, Gimme Shelter Security in Azure. Today we're going to talk about defense in depth and the zero trust model as the start of this series. And what better way to celebrate Halloween than the scariness that comes with not having a secure environment within your Azure ecosystem. So let's talk about how we can start to build that defense in depth strategy and set the foundation for really what this entire video series is going to entail and help to teach you as we go through these videos on a weekly basis. My name's Dwayne Natwick. I am an Azure MVP and a senior cloud training architect at Skill Me Up and Opsgility. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer and a regional lead for the program, and you can find me active on the social media links provided on this slide. So as I mentioned, this is a new video series that we're kicking off today, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk through many of the security services within Azure as we go through this series. I'm going to align this pretty closely as well with the AZ500 objective areas, so that hopefully as you go through this video series, you're interested in sitting for that AZ500 exam, this information may be also helpful for you in preparation for that exam. Today, we're going to set the foundation in how we build a defense in depth strategy and how we protect our house within the Azure environment, what those areas of protection are, shared responsibility, and then we're going to talk briefly about zero trust and the zero trust model within the Microsoft Azure and 365 ecosystem as we build upon the level of identity and access management over the next few videos after today. So it's important as you're building your security posture to understand within your enterprise where threats come from. And threats can be both internal and external. Internal threats are where you have potential vulnerabilities in terms of patch vulnerabilities and elevated privileges or development backdoors or unlocked doors left open by employees. And then the key one here in this list is shadow IT. Having a environment that, especially in today's world where many users are working remotely, we need to be cognizant of shadow IT and what might take place in terms of users finding different ways to access information that may not be compliant to organizational policies. And how we can lock that down and avoid that is an important recognition as a security administrator, and even policies that are written for the organization and for users within the organization to adhere to avoid potential threats. And then secondly is those external threats, which as a security administrator or practitioner, you're always looking for, and you're always worrying about these attacks that might come, like denial of service attacks or vulnerability exploits and things like that. Identity spoofing, somebody's identity being compromised in that environment. And OWASP does a great job of putting together those top threats and explaining what they are, so that if you are new to that security environment, you can identify what those threats might be. It's important for anybody that's working within the IT infrastructure to understand what these threats are, from a development standpoint, an architecture standpoint, and then an administration standpoint, to be able to recognize where these threats might come from and how we're going to protect those. And when we talk about that protection, I like to use the analogy of how you build a house and how you protect your house in terms of security. And the reason for that is it brings this defense in depth to something we can all relate to, right? We all understand. We all have a residence. We all live under a roof and we try to protect our family as best we can. And the ways we do that within our own plot of land is we build a house, we put a roof over our head. Well, we might have a fence around there, but at a minimum, we have exterior locks on our doors. We have a garage that protects our car. We have might have multiple floors that with our bedrooms where we sleep on the second floor, where if threats come in, we have a chance to protect ourselves or to respond to those threats before they traverse to our second floor. Right. We have interior doors that generally might have locks on them as well. And then for monitoring and continuity, then we have alarm systems and potentially generators to make sure the power doesn't go down, and to make sure that if somebody does breach that perimeter, we are alerted to that taking place. And that all goes again into that, then building your security posture and your defenses in depth there as well, where we have our data and we have our personal information, our enterprise information, all within the center here of what we're trying to protect. And then we have what the layers and the different layers that we're protecting. And it's important when you're building your security posture, we're looking at each of these layers and what security control we're putting in place in these layers. From our application standpoint, how we're protecting our applications, what we're doing to harden our compute infrastructure and our operating system, our network security, our perimeter security, what controls do we have in place, identity and access management, which again, we're going to talk about a lot because identity is the new security perimeter, because as we talk about the cloud environment and the physical security piece, the physical security within an Azure Microsoft 365 environment is no longer our responsibility as an organization or a user or an administrator, because we don't have control of our on-premises environment. We'll talk about that in the next couple slides, where we're talking about shared responsibility. So to bring that all together, we're, as we talk about the security house, we're, building. We have our building security, which is our fences and our doors and how we're protecting our building perimeter and our physical perimeter. But then we have our identity access, our role-based access control through keys. We have our keys to our door. We might have a garage door opener. That is how, and having that information, having those pieces to get into our residence is our role-based access control. You may not, and different users within your family organization may have different access to different doors, or or different keys to different doors within your environment, and that goes along as well with internal doors. You may have access. Parents and may have access to the kids' rooms where the other kids don't have access to their kids' rooms, and how all that works in terms of that internal security, and those the firewall and port rules go very similar to that. And then VLANs and secure transport protocols can be thought of as how, again, we have our separate rooms, and we have everybody has their own environment, their own place, and it's segmented, just like a virtual LAN would do, or within the Azure environment, a VNet would do. We have our locks on internal doors, API calls to protect and to allow information to come in based on what that identity is. Similar as well with putting additional deadbolts on your doors. You can think of that as how encryption and classification might work. And then finally, we have lock boxes and and jewelry and financial records, and then alarm systems and generators, and how all of that is then monitored, and how that's controlled, and how the continuity takes place within your infrastructure. And that brings us to shared responsibility. And when we talk about shared responsibility, we're talking about what controls within the security environment are Microsoft's responsibility versus the organization's responsibility. When we're talking about an on-premises environment, that is all within our control. We have control over the physical hosts, the physical network, the data center. But once we start moving into cloud infrastructures, we no longer have that control. We have and as we move to different cloud models of infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service, we are giving more and more of that control to the cloud providers such as Azure. And there's a trade-off there, because as we give more control to Azure, Azure's taking more Microsoft's taking more responsibility in terms of the availability and the strength of those controls. But you are losing what you can put in place there in terms of maybe organizational standard tools if you utilize third-party tools. Again, on the pro side, you're also decreasing your management overhead of those things. And as we move up there, if you're using infrastructure as a service, you are managing that operating system. You have to do the patch management and all of those things. So that's a very large management burden at times. And then as you move to platform services, Microsoft's taking on that operating system and all that compute infrastructure. But then there's this gray area here around network controls, identity and directory infrastructure, and application controls that might depend on what the service type is, as well as there may be additional enhancements to those controls that you as an organization may choose to turn on or leave as default with the best practice settings that Microsoft has in place. And then as we get to SaaS, we really are now really managing identity and data protection is really all we have control over. And may have heard the term that identity and access management is the new security perimeter, and that's really why, with more software as a service, SaaS-based applications that are out there, there really is no more need or requirement or ability for you as an organization to protect that underlying infrastructure. So having proper roles and identity management services in place within your organization is going to be very important in how you build data protection policies and information protection policies and classify your data properly within your environment becomes very, very important. And as we go through the series, and I have a few videos dedicated to Azure Active Directory and identity protection, those become very key to your responsibility and to your security posture and how you're going to secure your environment. And that brings us then to the Zero Trust model. And the Zero Trust model was something introduced by Forrester Research, a popular analyst firm, but it's been adopted in terms of how that identity is the new perimeter piece comes into play, and it's really comes into the realm of security in don't trust anybody that they are who they say they are, and they have access to what they say they have access to. Constantly have them be verifying that. And that protects your environment and allows you to have that level of security within your organization, that you're protecting the identities of your users, you're protecting devices and your applications, and you have those components in place that continue to verify who they are and what those verifiable means of how those users and devices put their trust and make their claims to who they are, and if there's a certain condition that is met, that you require them to re-verify who they are as well. And that goes into how that's implemented. And if you're familiar with conditional access, which we'll talk about in another video as well, the way that the zero trust model is implemented looks very similar to a conditional access policy. And where there's a signal of what might be a potential issue, like they're in a untrusted location or they are on an unpatched device and things like that. And then what we do from there is we then determine what we're going to do. Are we going to ask them to re-identify themselves utilizing multi-factor authentication? Are we going to just allow them through? Or are we going to limit that access, block certain applications, or are we just going to block access completely? And that's really how that zero trust model works. And we'll get into that and how we can implement that within the Azure environment. Again, when we talk about some advanced identity protection services and identity and access management services in a couple videos from now, we'll be talking about conditional access policies, which the diagramming of a conditional access policy looks identical to a zero trust model. And that brings us to the end of this video. We don't have any demos on this one because we're just laying some foundation here. There'll be some demos as we go through more of these videos, but feel free to reach out to me with your questions or comments on social media at the links provided on the slide. And I'll see you next week as we dive deeper into how we're going to get shelter within our Azure environment. Thank you very much.